All right, there we go. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod. Excited to come to you live with MSU assistant coach Saddi Washington. Before we begin, a quick reminder to rate and review the show on YouTube or your podcast player of your choice. It helps the algorithms a ton so other Spartan fans can find the show. Also, I plan to attend Moneyball on Tuesday, the 15th of July. Pretty sure that's the right day. So if anyone wants to stop by, say hi. I'll be there, I think. Pretty sure. Okay, coach, welcome to the Final Four. It's on the schedule. Thanks a ton for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Rod, why don't you lead us off here?
Okay. So, Coach, I think it's fair to say that you have perhaps the most unique perspective on the MSU Michigan rivalry. Maybe Doug Herner's the only other person I can think of who
Hmm.
might get into the same realm. Uh, I would think most of our listeners know this, but just in case they don't, your dad is one of the all time greats at MSU. You grew up in Lansing, went to Sexton. And then, as I think almost all our listeners would know, because it's much more recent, you coached for several years with a couple of different head coaches at Michigan. And now, of
Hmm.
course, you're entering your second season on the staff at MSU. Do you think that that's allowed you to have maybe any different insights than anybody else would have into the competition between the schools, the rivalry? Because obviously, as we know, we saw it get a little bit heated at times
Hmm.
last year. You're sitting in a very unique position, having been on the inside in both places.
Sure.
How do you see it? How do you see the rivalry and the competition between the two schools, and any of your thoughts on that?
Well, it's healthy. If you grew up in this state like we have, like typically you're a Spartan or you grow up a Wolverine. And even, during my time in Ann Arbor, I would do different speaking engagements. And, as you kind of introduce yourself to the audience, I would always tell them that, I was born of Spartan blood, through my
Right.
parents who are alum. But I think what allows me to have a fresh set of eyes around here, like, and yes, like when people say you have to be the first person to ever make that change, I say no, actually, it's not. It's Coach Herner. Coach
Right.
Herner he's the original Michigan man who's transitioned to East Lansing, and so I make sure I give him his props. But you know, uh, it's a healthy rivalry in all facets of it, and you just have to lean into it and embrace it for what it is.
Would you describe well, we always talk about facilities and differences between the programs, the support within the university and the athletic department. Are, do you notice big differences between the two schools, or even what are the differences, I guess, between, from a focus on basketball? Obviously, Michigan is a football focused school in general,
Yeah.
and so there's going to be a difference there probably.
Well, I think what you have is two premier academic and athletic institutions. And so the alumni bases are strong, they're passionate, they believe in the mantra of who they are. And so I think that's a beautiful thing when you can really have, support at the highest levels, and in terms of the resources that are available to our student athletes, the support from administration, all those things are really good, and which was really has always been attractive to me. And I felt fortunate to be able to work in both institutions. And, as much as people, will make remarks of, I'm glad you're on the other side now or whatever. But, we had some really good, my family and I, we had some really good years in Ann Arbor. We spent 8 years with Coach, 3 with Coach Beilein, 5 with Coach Jawan. We won a lot of games, we won a lot of championships. And so our experience there was great. And we still have a ton of friends in Ann Arbor. But as things change, the more things change, the more things remain the same. And so, my history, my relationship with Coach Izzo goes back, to when I was 14, 15 years old. and coming up to the gym, playing open gym with the guys, and, them recruiting me a little bit out of high school. And, ultimately, he's been a great mentor for me personally throughout my coaching career. Not very many decisions have I made in this profession that haven't gone through him in some capacity. And so was always been grateful of our relationship. And, as things evolved and the opportunity, to come to Michigan State, my very first call was like, hey, if this can't happen because of the rivalry, I understand. And he was the first to say, like, I don't care about that stuff. Like, I know you, I know who you are. And so, that's where everything sprung from. And he's the man. And so my family and we're very grateful for the Izzo family in general, and for our Spartan family for welcoming us. And, we had a really good experience in year one, and looking forward to, trying to move things forward again in year two.
Right. And, I think you had for those who don't know, of course, this will be your second season with Michigan State. You joined last year before the season. You mentioned online that you felt you were at a crossroads, or some sort of, maybe you felt your career was going sideways before coming to Michigan State. I mean, can you go into that a little bit more, sort of what was going through your mind as far as, where you are in your life and your coaching?
Yeah, there are some that believe that, in the coaching profession, it's just a matter of time before you have to go through getting fired. And I'll never subscribe to that, because, I come from a faith-filled family. I always believe if you work hard, you do your job well, good things will come of it. And like I said, we had some really good years in Ann Arbor, and, the last year and a half, not so great. But it was just time for transition, right? And so when you're caught in that space, and for me, it was, maybe 6 weeks, all kind of things go through your head in terms of, man, wish we could have finished things better there. What's next? I have, two kids, a daughter who's graduating, ironically, in the next couple of weeks from Ohio State.
Got the Big Ten covered.
Yeah, so we're all mixed up in it, and I also have a son who's also going to be a rising senior in high school next year. So, with the family dynamics, you're kind of wondering like how that's going to play a part. You don't want to, my wife and we've tried to be very intentional about the moves that we make in this profession. I've never wanted to kind of jump around, from job to job. And so when you're caught in that space, just the uncertainty of it all. And then, as jobs open and close, there's a level of anxiety, because you can kind of see the countdown happening with, what's still open. And, me knowing that I still have a lot to give to this profession. So that's kind of the space that I was in, but, remaining prayerful, friends reaching out, keeping spirits high, and just, relying that my body of work, would be useful somewhere. And that is what kind of that's what made me hopeful that something would work out.
Yeah,
and it did.
Yeah, well, and it's got to be very challenging as, father, to try and keep a stability for your kids without, that transition, like you said, every few years moving around. Although you probably wonder, are you sacrificing your career? Are you preventing yourself from moving up in the ranks or having other opportunities by staying in one place for too long, right? I mean, that's a balance, and you can't know what the right answer is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, all those things go into it, and I don't judge people who do that. But, like, my family and our families in this profession sacrifice enough for the amount of time that we're away. And I'm a firm believer that, God will always reward me for making decisions that center my family. And so if that means that we miss out on some opportunities, that just means that it wasn't for us at the time, because, I believe timing is everything. And, the way things align this year and the way things align, to come to Michigan State. It was really a full circle moment for myself, being able to come back home, and for us to have the season that we had. I mean, you couldn't script it any better, right?
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
So you've been, I guess, fortunate enough to coach alongside three guys that I would say have proven themselves to be all-time greats in the profession. The current head coach, you're working with Tom Izzo. And
Hmm.
then I would say a lot of people would feel John Beilein, and in my opinion, Greg Kampe
Hmm.
also belongs in a discussion of some of the best coaches who have ever done it.
Hmm.
Obviously, three very different people, three very different jobs, all of that. But I'm curious if you think, is there any one trait that they have in common or commonality between the three of them, even though they are very different people?
Yeah, I think the common trait amongst the three of them, and I also don't want to leave out Coach Jawan because my experience with him was a great experience as well in terms of how it has shaped me as being a coach and the things that we were successful at and how I can use that moving forward. So, I don't want to minimize his
Sure.
impact in my career as well. But I would say for sure the common thread between Coach Camby, Coach Beilein, and Coach Izzo is, you know, their patient decision making. Like, and that goes with the longevity that they've had in this profession. Sometimes I think as younger assistants or just assistants in general, like, we're trying to like get things done at an expedited pace. And, sometimes you need that seasoned vet to just, calm the troops down and, take all the information and before a decision is made. And that's one thing that I've really kind of taken away from the three of them and the longevity that they have, that they're really measured decision makers. And, more times than not, um, their path is the right path that we should go.
Well, if you need the right path, you need to make sure you head on over to the Brothers Just Two Gutters. It has definitely been. Hopefully, this season we'll have a little better rating threes than last year, at least from from behind the arc. But it's been raining a ton outside, so if you need your gutters taken care of, make sure you contact the Brothers Just Two Gutters. They can cover you when you're the east side or the west side of the state. As a listener to the show, you of course get 10% off by mentioning Final Four when you get your estimate. You can do that at our support page at the Final Four is on the schedule.com/support, or if you're lazy, tffinots.com/support. All right, coach, let's move away a
You
little bit
see how
from.
smooth that segue was, Eric? That was
I
really
appreciate it.
smooth.
I
He's
appreciate
he's
that.
really, really good at the segues for the live reads.
I try and do my best here. So, coach, let's talk a little bit broader just about recruiting and not even NIL because that has obviously changed things too. But let's just talk about high
Sure.
school recruiting. We've noticed, and I'm sure you have, you've been rooting for quite a while now in the state of Michigan. You're obviously from
Hmm.
Michigan, like as
Hmm.
Rada and I are from. The amount of players coming from Michigan who are high level players has diminished and gone down quite a bit. I mean, you look at the late 90s and 2000s, and they're all Michigan kids for the most part.
Yeah.
That has really changed significantly. Do you? I mean, you've obviously noticed it. Do you think that will get better? Do you think there's a way to fix that? What do you think the problem is? What are your thoughts on sort of the recruiting in Michigan?
Yeah, it's funny. I was having this conversation with Carlton Valentine, who you guys know,
Sure.
Yeah.
probably earlier this week or late last week. I don't remember now, but I was mentioning to him, I said, man, at one time you had three high major kids just on your team,
Right.
in Denzel and Sap and Bryn
Right.
Forbes. Those three
Right.
were all high major kids just on one team. And yes, when I first got in the profession, back in 05, 06, there was a healthy handful of, prospects within the state to where we didn't have to go far. That has changed and it's been a little bit on the downtick, but I think, like anything else, it's kind of cyclical. Like we're on a downturn, but there's some good young talent emerging, in the later classes, and I think it will get back to an uptick. So, you just got to be patient with it. um, for what has caused it, I don't really have a great answer for it. But what I do know is, the Spartans will continue to remain diligent in our pursuit of, local talent and regional talent and national talent to make sure, we give ourselves the best position to hunt for championships.
Yeah, it just seems like there's a, when you look at it from a population standpoint, Michigan's not changed a ton, yet
Hmm.
you see a real change now in high level prospects from basketball versus football. Football still
Hmm.
seems to be pretty healthy. Is it just, do you think it's like the prep academies? Is that pulling a lot of players out of the high school? Is it MHSAA? You don't want to say anything bad about them, but I mean,
Yeah.
is it the way that they've sort of structured transfers and those sorts of things that maybe has made it a little more difficult for players to find the right level of competition, let's say, and that's what they're maybe looking for now?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, but at the end of the day, like the kids are still from the state of Michigan.
Right.
So,
Hmm.
if they're homebred from inside the state, we still feel like we have as great a chance as anybody to have access to them, even if they go to a prep school or academy or anything like that. So, those that make that decision, like that's a decision that themselves and their families make for what they believe is in their best interest. But, again, we have to remain diligent in making sure we identify the kids, whether they're homegrown or outside of our borders. It's still the old fashioned way of identifying talent, recruiting it the right way, building relationships. Because at the end of the day, as long as Coach Izzo is around, as long as I'm around, and our staff, we are a relational staff. And yeah, that there's a um, financial transactional component to it, but the foundation of this program that Coach Izzo has built has always been a relational program, and you can tell that by the number of former players that come back, and are still close and connected to the program.
Right.
Yeah, I imagine Grind Week's been interesting for you to experience it in person.
Yeah, I've always heard a lot about it, and so to go through my first grind week last year was incredible. Like it was, like that's one of the things that I always one of the components, if you wanted to look at a difference between the institutions, like we had guys come back at Ann Arbor, but not at the level that they come back
Yeah.
here in East Lansing, and with kind of the passion that and authenticity that they do it. And so to be able to see it up close, to see the brotherhood, and even the guys that had transferred, at one point who were still welcome back. Like that was really eye opening for me. And to see Loopy and Coach Iz just like welcome them back with open arms, because as Loopy would say, at one point they were ours. So that really resonated with me, because that's not the case everywhere else. And so I feel very fortunate to really be able to get a behind the curtain look at what has made this place so great for so many years.
So, an aspect of the current game that we hear a lot about in the media, we hear coaches talking about it a lot, are the changes that we've seen really accelerate in the last 5 years or so in regard to the portal and immediate transfer eligibility, and of course, NIL.
Right.
And again, we hear a lot of talk about that, and I think most of it tends to be negative. I'm curious from your perspective as a coach who's working with players, kids all the time. Um, are there things about those two elements that you see as a positive?
Yeah, I mean, like the start of my career when I was at Oakland, like we lived off the portal. Like that was kind of the heartbeat of our program. And the difference obviously was when they transferred, they had to sit a year.
Right.
But when we were able to recruit high school kids on the front end, but then also bring back kids home, who had gone maybe to a higher level, it really that was kind of the anchor of our program and the success that we were able to have there. So, the portal itself has always been around, and it's not the boogeyman. I think that the combination of all the elements of being able to transfer and be eligible immediately, and the financial component has made it more challenging. But those things in and of itself aren't the issue, because at the end of the day, young people still want to be held accountable. They still want to be coached. They still want to have an opportunity and a launch pad to, better themselves, better them family, and better their families as they pursue their professional interests.
Right. Do you, so you would see those things then? I understand a lot of times people are talking about it from the coach's perspective or even the fans' perspective, but
Mm,
specific to the opportunities that it presents to players, you would see that ability to find another situation, or as you say, to better themselves, whether we're talking about direct financial impact or, just the opportunity to play at a higher level, improve themselves,
yeah.
for if they have professional aspirations, that those would be positives you would see in the current environment that maybe didn't exist in the same way a decade ago.
Yes and no. I mean, like, yes, for the things that we just mentioned. However, what has been created though is the instability, not the instability, but the just the nature of of getting through adversity, right?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
at 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 some point in your life, you've gone through adversity, and certainly as adults, there's always something that you're going to have to deal with, and so to not have that muscle, to not build up that muscle as a young person, and then it smack you in the face as an adult, that can be really traumatic. And so I think that part of it is lost. um, I think everybody has no problem with the financial aspect from it in terms of student athletes being able to make money. However, the strain that it has put on institutions and just athletics as a whole, I think we weren't prepared for what it
Right.
would escalate to. But being able to kind of create some early generational wealth in some cases for young people, or at least get them off to a better start than the average student graduating from college. That could be a very good thing if managed correctly. So there's pluses and minuses to it all, and hopefully uh, we'll get the adults in the room, because, right, like, the adults in the room are the ones that are making the decisions
Sure.
about it. The adults in the room can really kind of form a structure that works for everybody, that is a little bit more healthy for everyone. And, we'll move forward accordingly.
Yeah, well, resiliency is obviously super important. And the one thing I don't need to work on my muscles, I don't need to do clean my windows. So if you need your windows cleaned, contact the contact the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. They're obviously a larger region than just Grand Rapids itself, the larger metropolitan area. If you need your windows cleaned and you don't want to do it yourself, which why do you want to get up on a ladder unless you're cutting down nets, right, Coach?
That's
So
right.
contact the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids today. You can find them at our support page again, whether it's your house, your business, high rise. They even clean the windows of the state capitol in Lansing. So they do it all. Troy and his team will come out. They do fantastic work, great pricing. You also get 15% off just by mentioning Final Four when you go and get an estimate at our support page. Again, at tffinots.com/support. Speaking of glass, let's talk about some of your rebounders here. Jackson
Wait a
Kohler and
minute.
Coen
Wait a minute.
Carr.
We gotta stop. We gotta stop here. I know I wasn't a great assist guy in my playing days, but I feel like I'm like throwing all these nice little lobs to Eric right now, and you're just slamming them home, man. You're doing an awesome job.
Well, you know what? I would say with Coen Carr, isn't it like that with him? I mean, you could throw it within 10 feet of the basket. And he's going to make you look good, right?
Listen,
And I
listen.
think
There's
that's
some guys where you can just put the ball in the stratosphere, and they just have the God-given ability to go get it and do some special things. And Coen Carr is absolutely that.
did, with his recruitment. I can't remember. You were not involved in that because that was
Yeah,
before
I
your
wasn't
time.
here
Yeah.
yet. Yeah,
What was it? What was your first impression watching him in person play? What was that? That was in Ann Arbor though, probably, right?
it was. Like
Yeah.
he kind of from an athletic standpoint, he kind of reminded me of having like that Miles Bridges effect. Like there's
Hmm.
some guys that just when they get a full speed ahead and get going down the floor, you become in awe almost of what he's able to do. And it's funny to see, when people come to practice, whether it's, just supporters or scouts or whatever, the first time they see Coen take flight, even though you've seen it so many times in video, you've seen it in practice, like you just look up in our little area of the practice facility, and you just see a lot of eyebrows raising and a lot of heads shaking because he is really a unique talent from that standpoint.
What's interesting too is now I almost get the feeling that people take it totally for granted now at Michigan State, the fans, and and not that they don't appreciate and love the dunks, but now everyone wants more, right? It's like anything. You have something and okay, but what else can you do? So that's the question, of course, in everyone's mind. He hit some threes at the end of the last season. We
Yeah,
all know that his handle's important because that makes him a lot tougher, protecting
yeah.
the basket. But what if he's got develops an outside shot? Now you're facing, you know, I don't know. It's like what I can't remember I'm sure Rod remembers the Greek, the rock from Odysseus, right? The rock and the 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 typhoon or something, or the
Hmm.
whirlpool. Anyway, you
Hmm.
don't have you have bad options. How is that coming along? I mean, we hear talk. I mean, Moneyball, whatever. Moneyball is Moneyball, but uh, where is he in that and developing the rest of his game to make himself even a bigger threat than he was last year?
Yeah, I feel like it's been kind of his natural progression, getting a little bit better each year. And he was highly motivated, coming off the end of the season. And he was one of the guys that didn't take a lot of time off, once we had our final game in the Elite Eight. And he was back in the gym, working on all those different components of his game that he needed to get better at. And shooting obviously was a big area, working on his handles. He had become a better defender last
Hmm.
season
Yeah.
for us, a two-way player. And so, like a lot of times when we have conversations, with the NBA guys, we try to pass that information on as motivation and information to our current players. It's like, hey, like we know that this is your ultimate goal. We're trying to gather as much information for you to give to you so that these are the things that we work on in the off season. And, with him, really developing, his 3-point shot even more this summer. He could be an elite level 3-and-D guy at the NBA level, at the professional level. So I think those are things that he's really become cognizant of. And coach has this saying: um, you either like, love, or live the game. And so I think Cohen's going from loving to living the game because he has a mission in mind in terms of where he wants us to be as a program, and how and where he wants to go for his future aspirations.
I mean, we just watching him last year, we were amazed at his progression. The one most obvious point is the free throw line. I mean, he started
Mhm.
shooting, I don't know, what is he, like 35% to begin the season? And then about mid-November or maybe early December, he hardly ever missed. It was pretty
Yeah.
amazing that, I mean, that's obviously a very controllable thing. It just shows you the
Hmm.
focus and sort of the dedication he puts into it. And then
Sure.
the rebounding change as well. I mean, how do you see his role this coming season changing? I mean, do you expect him probably for more points and scoring, but do you expect him to get more even more rebounds and expect him to have more versatility defending? I mean, how do you think is changing for the coming season? We need
Yes.
some sort of scoop here.
Y- yes. Yes. And yes. All of
Okay,
the above.
fair
Like
enough.
for us to be good, he's one of the guys that's going to have to take another jump in his game. And it's not any just one thing. It's a culmination of all the things that you just mentioned. His shooting, his rebounding, his versatility, and his defending. Whether it's perimeter guys, I thought there was times we had to put him on bigger power forwards, and he did a really good job there. All those things add up to success for him, and more and success for us. And so, he's been really intentional about how he's spent his time in the gym this summer. And, I'm excited for his trajectory and, what that's going to do for the overall scope of our program.
Uh, I wanted to maybe before we leave that, another guy that maybe started playing a little bit bigger role late in the season from deep is Jackson Kohler. And I'm wondering, and obviously we're not asking you to give away the game plan here, but it seems to me that it's reasonable to think that we might see an increase in volume from him as a perimeter shooter. And that's something that over the course of Coach Izzo's career has often been a feature of the offense, is that four man that can really
Hmm.
stretch the floor. Do you
Hmm.
think we're going to see, is it reasonable for fans to expect to see more of that from Jackson this year? Just in terms of the number of shots he's taking?
Yeah, it's reasonable because he was kind of on that trend, as the season was ending.
Right.
And Jackson is he's one of the hardest workers. Like, that old saying, like a coach would say to players all the time, like, don't do anything in the game that you're not working on in practice and working on your own time. And so, Jackson is one of those kids that he gets locked in and he works on all facets of his game, his post game, his outside shooting, all those things. I think we will see him taking that next step going into this year, and it's necessary in order for us to kind of go where we want to go and be as good as we want to be. Those are all things that he has to get better at from an offensive perspective, from a defensive perspective, continuing, to work on his agility and his ability, to contain, perimeter guys out on the floor if we get in any switching patterns or, or things of that nature, and then just becoming a better post positional defender. So, those are all things that, we've talked to him about. And I'm excited about my man Zero because, he is the energy guy. He's the lifeblood of the team,
Sure.
when it comes from that standpoint.
So sticking with the topic of big men, you've over your career, certainly at Michigan, now at Michigan State, have,
Hmm.
from what I understand, have had a reputation as being a coach who works a lot with the big men.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah. So
always, well, it's
go
always
ahead.
seemed, the question I wanted to ask you was, it's always seemed to me that at Michigan State, the traits that they look for in big men might not always be exactly the same as at some other programs. Like, there are very, very good centers. Some of the guys over the years, for example, that I think have played at Purdue, I kind of have a hard time imagining them playing at Michigan State because they might not have. You were talking about Jackson having the ability to defend out on the floor, right? We
Hmm.
know that's a big deal at MSU. It's one of the things I think Carson Cooper really excels at, is that he can move that way. Are there certain traits in recruiting, be it the high school ranks or even in the portal, that are emphasized at Michigan State for bigs that maybe aren't universal to every college team?
I don't know if it's whether it's universal to every college team or what's emphasized, but um, first and foremost, you got to have a level of toughness and resilience to put on that Spartan uniform. And so that's something we look for. And especially with our post players, we constantly talk about bully work. We want to be aggressive on the offensive side of the ball. We want to be aggressive on the defensive side of the ball. And, those things have always been a trait of Spartan basketball, very physical style of play. The league itself has always been a very physical
Sure.
league. And so you got to have durable guys who aren't going to shy away from contact, that they embrace contact. And then, you have to play with the motor. Like, one of the things that you learn quickly being in a practice, Coach Izzo practice, is the intensity level is always high. Like, He's a great reader of body language. And so from the moment, guys walk into the gym, as well as coaches, like we have to bring enthusiasm and energy to the practice that the players can feed off of. But when you have it already in the locker room, it just makes our job a lot easier. And so when you have a group of bigs that really embrace the physicality of the game on both sides of the ball, I think we have a recipe for something special.
Just out of curiosity, getting back to you having that reputation of being a very good big man coach, obviously as a player yourself, you were a wing, right?
Hmm.
What was that transition like for you, coaching uh, guys who were being asked to do different things than you were as a player? How long of an adjustment was that for you as a younger coach when you first started doing that? Was that easy?
Yeah, so I have to give some credit here to Coach Beilein because Coach Beilein had an opening on his staff about midway through my time at Oakland, and he didn't hire me. And one of the reasons, well, the reason he said he didn't hire me was because I didn't have any experience coaching post players. And I think after I got that phone call, I went into the office. I went in Coach Kampe's office and said, I want to coach the big men next year because I never wanted, I always felt like I was a coach who I coach basketball.
Right.
I can,
Right.
and I never wanted to be eliminated from consideration because of that anymore. And so ultimately, it was an easy transition because I took a lot of what would do on the perimeter, and a lot of it is footwork based,
Hmm.
positioning, and footwork. And if you can become elite in that, I always tell because a lot of bigs they just want to be guards anyway. So I said just be a bigger guard in a smaller area. So
Right.
we started there, right? And then just studying my craft and getting better and taking little things that I would see on the internet, things that work, and over time you kind of develop your niche, and just a culmination of those things, I've been able to work with some really high level kids at Oakland, at Michigan, and now at Michigan State. So it's been really fun for me, being able to be a part of the developmental process of I call it the BIGs.
uh, so a quick question then about the team as it stacks up for this coming season. One thing that Eric and I thought we observed when you got done with the portal is that it looks to me like the team clearly is bigger on the
Hmm.
perimeter than it
Hmm.
was last year. It's a little bit different makeup. Was that a conscious desire on the part of the coaching staff to get bigger on the perimeter, or did it just so happen that the guys you wanted for other reasons just happened to be a little taller?
No, it was intentional. I know, especially from a defensive side of the ball, and Coach Woj always talked about, it having more length, and then, having athleticism because, the times when we would be in some of our switching patterns, when you got guys who have the durability and the athleticism to stay in front of the ball, it really makes it challenging for offenses. You can really
Hmm.
disrupt offenses at a higher level. But we did put an emphasis on that. We put an emphasis on trying to recruit more shooting. And so
Hmm.
we'll see if those things come together and blend as we imagine it could. But we're really happy and excited with the young men that we brought into the program, both from the portal and the freshmen that are here with us now.
Yeah. So when it comes to the freshmen, we've had both Cam and Jordan on the show. Very impressive young men. I mean, just in
Hmm.
talking to them, and especially Cam Ward, he's got so much charisma and person. That kid is he reminds us a little bit, at least for me, a little bit of Jace Richardson. Just only that you kind of see that
Hmm.
guy, and he's going to be successful whatever he does in life. And I just kind of feel like
Sure.
it is with him. I've not been to Moneyball. I've heard he's looked good. That's the only opportunity we have to see, as fans have the chance to see these
Sure.
players. I mean, they've only been on campus a couple weeks now at this point. What's your impression of those two kids, and how much of an impact and, time do you expect them to see them, during the season?
Yeah, well, the DMV was good to the
Yeah.
Spartans this past season, and
Yeah.
those two kids coming from that area, they both, were state champions, and they really did a good job of forming a relationship with one another, and then in turn, our guys did a really good job of forming and building relationships with them throughout the year, even before they touched campus. So it was really seamless once both of them got on campus. And yes, I think you're right. Like Cam has a certain charisma and personality about him that is really infectious. And Jordan has been awesome in terms of his work ethic and what he brings to the table. And so we're really excited, for both of them, for both of their maturation process. Obviously with Caleb going down, it
Yeah.
opened up some opportunity, for both of them in different ways. And I think that as the season progresses, as the summer progresses, as the season progresses, the reps that they'll be able to get is just going to help them, which is ultimately going to help us moving forward.
And I guess
And then, oh, go ahead.
okay, the last question I had for you, Coach, is about the point guard, the returning point guard, Jeremy
Hmm.
Fears.
Hmm.
Um, my opinion as a fan is that if you have a great point guard, that's kind of a force multiplier for your team. A guy, the old cliche goes, makes everybody better, but it's really true. And when you have that kind of player and when you don't. I've believed since I first saw him play in high school that Jeremy Fears had the potential to be that kind of player. And I
Hmm.
think he showed a lot of that potential last season. But I'm curious your perspective. We all know what he went through as a freshman in his
Sure.
true freshman year. And then
Hmm.
last year, he comes back, he's a starter. And I thought, to my eyes, that it looked like he had pretty much physically recovered. But I would listen to things that he said and things that Coach Izzo said during the season that suggested that no, there's another gear Jeremy can get to athletically that he hasn't quite reached again yet, but it's coming.
Yeah.
And I've seen some video over the off season that was impressive in terms of his explosiveness athletically. I guess it's a two-parter. One, do you agree with that, that there was another level that he had to get to, and he is showing signs of actually getting to that peak over this off season? And two, if that's the case, how important is that going to be in improving his overall play, maybe just from a confidence level?
Yeah, yeah. We would comment so many times during our meetings and during the season last season that I think, a lot of times people, because he was playing, people would take for granted that, especially in the non-conference, like wasn't even a year removed from
Right,
a very traumatic experience that he had. And
Right.
for him to even just be out on the floor, moving the way that he was moving, even in the early part of the season, was a miracle and a blessing in and of itself. And, as the season progressed and went on, he became healthier and healthier and stronger and stronger. I think you could see the glimpses of his athleticism, of his burst, and things of that nature. And now for him to have a fully healthy summer of training, um, him being able to be a part of his brother's experience with the draft,
right.
is an extra motivator for him. And so I know that he's been working his tail off as well to, refine a lot of aspects of his game, whether it be shooting, whether it be his quickness, whether it be his overall fitness and athleticism. And so we're really excited for him and his next steps for us this year, as well as his leadership, because all of those things are going to be necessary for us to, try to be in position to make another run at this thing.
And then, the other question, maybe you can't answer this because it seems like it's a real struggle now with the fluidity of players, going from moving around a lot more, to have a sort of target for how many players you need to recruit for the next year, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's always been the unanticipated exit from someone going to early to the draft, let's say, or
Sure.
going pro. Now, obviously, you got the possibility of people leaving, and what do do you guys have targets right now for like how many players you want, what positions you're looking for, or is it kind of fluid? You just almost, I mean, how do you determine these sorts of things? You don't need, if it's top secret, you don't need to tell me, but I'm just kind of curious how you sort of evaluate and figure out, we need, a point guard, we need this, that, or the other thing, because it's got to be, there's just too much uncertainty, I think, to really know.
Sure. What does Stephen A say? It's fluid. It's
Yeah.
fluid.
Right.
Like it is fluid. Like and I think what has changed significantly is kind of the predictability of what your team looks like in the fall and what
Right.
your
Yeah.
team looks like in the spring after the season was over. And you could kind of anticipate who was going to be um, transitioning on based on play and where they were projecting from an NBA standpoint. You kind of have a feel if guys aren't happy and could kind of be on the fence if they may transfer for a better spot. And then, with the way things are now, everything can appear great and guys still move on. And so, for the balance and protection of the team, I think you have to continue to recruit at all positions with
Mhm.
the with some expectancy that if you have any attrition, that you at least have um, some recruits to pivot to, and then obviously the portal is the ultimate. Like you can clean up anything that you miss out on with the portal because whether it's attrition through going to the NBA or attrition through transferring, the portal is the X factor in terms of being able to fill out your roster and the need and fill the needs that you have.
Yeah. No, I
But
feel,
and I won't, I'm sorry, but this will
no,
always be a program under Coach Izzo where we're going to aggressively recruit high school students and do our best to retain, the current roster because after the season was over, our coach, was saying in the meeting, the portal starts here in this locker room. Like I'm trying to
right.
retain as many guys, and that's how you have the continuity, that's how you have the culture that is able to be consistent because there's a common thread, throughout the guys who are consistently in that locker room who can speak the language of how things are supposed to be around here.
Yeah, no, we've commented that, you look at other programs in the Big Ten, and Illinois is a good example. Michigan has been one recently where there's just so much, you lose so many players, to maintain that culture has got to be very challenging. And then you get to a cycle where it's really hard to ever get a point where you actually start establishing a new one, right? Because you
Mm,
just have that constant churn. And I don't think, like, I'm sure if you talk to Brad Davis or uh Underwood, not Davison, Brad Underwood
mhm,
at
mhm,
Illinois, he would tell you he wants to have a stable high school recruiting base, but
mhm.
he just hasn't been able to maintain that for whatever reason. And so it's
Yeah,
hard to kind of get to reestablish that. So I think, we are spoiled as Michigan State fans that we have players we can watch. A Coen Carr,
yeah,
3 years, progress. And you'd think a player like that generally would be someone who wouldn't stick around because, there'd
sure.
be a big price tag somewhere and they'd want to take off. So, it's
Yeah,
credit
well,
to the
I
staff. They,
think I think Coach does a really good job, and he's a big relationship guy. And when you see the guys who come before you, and you've seen their development, you've seen their trajectory, like you definitely have to think twice before you step out and leave that prematurely. And as we all learn, it's a lot of different ways to go about recruiting and being
sure.
successful at it. Our motto is our motto, and coach isn't going to um, turn from that. And why would he? Like he's been super successful. Big Ten championship, 8 Final Four, 27 straight NCAA appearances. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so, he's a very smart man. And, I think that is also attractive to a lot of prospects in that there is some consistency and continuity about what we do.
Yeah. Well, having the success from all the relationships is important, which is why our Nudge Printing is our longest, best relationship we've had, the longest sponsor for the show. They provide the shirts like I'm wearing today with a logo. If you want to go and head on over to nudgeprinting.com, they have all kinds of logos, of course, and all the apparel for Michigan State and a number of other schools as well. You get 20% off as a listener to the show. Just typing in Final Four as one word in the checkout. Not only Michigan State, you've got the other schools in the state of Michigan outside of the University of Michigan. You've also got Indiana and Iowa, and I think Minnesota now is for other Big Ten schools. So head on over to nudgeprinting.com. Great selection. And again, if you want our stuff, you can go to nudgeprinting.com/TFFINOTS. Well, Coach, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your time and looking forward to this year. I know Rod's maybe not, I shouldn't say you're not optimistic, but I feel like
No,
this team
I'm
has the potential
optimistic.
I guess what I have a feeling this team could even go further than last year's team. I think there's a potential there. You never know how it's all going to fit together. I think probably no one expected what happened last year to lap the field in the Big Ten. I think that was probably a surprise. I assume for everyone, even coaching staff. I mean, I guess you always assume you guys are going to be successful, but I think there's a real chance for this team to go a long ways next year too. So I'm very excited and looking forward to it. I assume you are as well.
No, we are, and I appreciate you guys inviting me on. This was fun. Um, you know, uh, Definitely get behind this team. These young men are working extremely hard. We're going to do our best to put the best product on the floor. And at the end of the day, that these guys are passionate about the program. They're passionate about the community. They're passionate about what we're doing in the classroom. And when we have all those things aligning, some special things can happen. So thanks again, and go green.
Yeah, go white.
Go ahead.
Well, absolutely. Seeing Cam Ward, I think he was scoring 50 points at Moneyball. We expect the exact same thing on the floor this season, right? Everything that happens in Moneyball translates directly 100% to the season.
Exactly.
I just had one more comment on what you just said, Coach. I think one of the things that we felt from where we're sitting, and I think a lot of fans felt the same way about last year's team, is in addition to the success you had, it was such an easy team to root for. That the collection of guys you had, you talked about the work ethic and the kind of people they are, that was all really evident. So it sounds to me like you're very confident that we're going to see something very similar this season from this group.
Well, when the guys in the locker room sacrifice for the greater good, you give yourself a chance because you can be really talented. We've all been around really talented teams, but the locker room be a very messy place, and it doesn't typically go well. And so when the guys sacrifice for one another, believe in what we're doing, and challenge each other in a very healthy way, that's when some really special things happen. And that's what happened for us last year. We were able to celebrate one another's success. And because we had that humility, it was one of the best seasons, both in the classroom and on the basketball court.
Right.
And that wasn't a coincidence.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll wrap it up there. And so until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.
Go white.
Excellent. We're still live. I'm going to stop it here. All right, Coach, thanks so much again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, that was great.
Best luck
Thank
to you in
you.
the season. I'm